She wasn't meant to touch him. But in that instant, Aria Bennett didn't think twice. The tray wobbled a bit in her hand, her breath hitched, and before anyone could grasp what was unfolding, she kissed him. Right there, in front of everyone. In front of her. At that moment, it felt surreal. The music kept playing, glasses clinked, laughter filled the air, but one person stood completely frozen. Valentina Cross. And across the room, Dominic DeLuca slowly rose to his feet. But hold on, here's the jaw-dropping part. That kiss? It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing. It wasn't an accident. It was something buried deep, something perilous, something from the past that should have remained hidden. And what transpired just seconds later didn't merely ruin a night. It shattered everything. Valentina Cross had always been a firm believer in control. Not the loud, attention-seeking kind, but a quieter, more refined version. Her control was subtle, elegant, precise. The sort that made people lower their voices when she entered a room. That evening, she found herself at the heart of a private rooftop restaurant, gazing out at the twinkling city lights. The air was soft, the ambience luxurious, and everything around her was just as she liked it. Perfect. She adjusted her glass with steady fingers, her expression serene. Sitting across from her was Dominic DeLuca, powerful, composed, observing everything. Even when it seemed like he wasn't. He wasn't just her fiancé. He was a man who commanded respect and even fear. But with her, he was different. Or at least, that's what she liked to think. "You're quiet tonight," Dominic remarked, his voice low and measured. Valentina offered a soft smile. "I'm just lost in thought." "That can be dangerous," he replied, a small smile flickering on his lips. It was a rare sight, and when it appeared, people took notice. But Valentina didn't react like everyone else. She didn't need to. She was accustomed to him, accustomed to his silence, accustomed to the way his presence effortlessly filled the space around them. Yet, there was something about Valentina that often went unnoticed. She was observant. She noticed the way a waiter hesitated, how someone avoided eye contact, and the tension that crept into a room before anyone spoke. And tonight there was something, small, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a shift. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. Not yet, but she felt it. Then, "Excuse me, ma'am." A gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. Valentina looked up to see the waitress standing beside her table, balancing a tray with practiced ease. Aria Bennett, dressed in a simple uniform, neat and composed, with a calm expression. But her eyes, there was something in them that Valentina couldn't quite identify. "Your wine," Aria said softly. Valentina nodded. "Thank you." Their eyes locked for a brief moment, and in that instant, something passed between them, unspoken, unclear, but undeniably real. Then, just like that, everything felt smooth. But Valentina's fingers tightened a bit around her glass. Something just didn't sit right, and she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Across the table, Dominic was watching her, quietly, not overtly, not directly, but he was definitely observing, always observing. "You're doing it again," he said. Valentina blinked, caught off guard. "Doing what?" "Thinking too much." She exhaled softly. "Maybe." Her gaze flicked briefly to where the waitress had just walked away, just for a heartbeat, then back to Dominic. "It's nothing," she insisted. But deep down, she knew it wasn't nothing, because across the room, Aria had paused mid-step, just for a heartbeat. Her back was turned, and her grip on the tray tightened a fraction. Then she resumed her path, as if nothing had happened. But something had, and no one had voiced it yet. The evening rolled on, filled with conversations, soft laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Everything was as it should be, yet beneath the surface, something was brewing. Slow, quiet, and dangerous. Valentina leaned back a bit, her eyes wandering across the room again. And there was Aria, standing by another table, but not fully engaged in her work. Her eyes, they flickered, just for a moment, toward Dominic, then darted away. Too quick for most to catch, but not for Valentina. In that instant, a small, uncomfortable feeling settled in her chest. Jealousy? No, it wasn't that. It was something different. something colder, something sharper. It didn't feel like mere interest. It felt like recognition. But that didn't quite add up. Valentina leaned forward again, her voice steady. Do you know her? Dominic didn't lift his gaze from his glass. Know who? The waitress. A pause. Brief. Almost imperceptible. But Valentina noticed. No, he replied. Simple and flat-controlled. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. There was something about that pause that lingered with her, and she couldn't understand why. The music shifted slightly, taking on a slower, more intimate tone, more subdued. The night was settling in, and with it came that familiar feeling. Valentina lifted her glass once more, taking a small sip as she tried to ease her tension. You're overthinking this, she reminded herself. Everything is fine. Everything is under control. That's what she kept telling herself. But across the room, Aria's hand was trembling just a bit, barely noticeable, almost imperceptible, yet undeniably real. When Aria finally turned her gaze, it didn't wander to the tables or the guests. It was fixed solely on Dominic, just for a fleeting moment. Then she looked away, but it was too late. Valentina had caught it, and in that instant, something inside her shifted, not with a loud bang or a dramatic flare, but enough to make a difference, enough to change everything, because she didn't quite grasp it yet. She was unaware of the truth, the past, or what lay ahead. But deep down, she sensed it, a quiet instinct, a warning that something was off. She had learned long ago that when something feels wrong, it usually is. But this time, it wasn't just wrong, it was dangerous. And before the night wrapped up, before the music faded, and before the glasses were cleared away, that tiny feeling would evolve into something irreversible. Because sometimes, the moment you dismiss the smallest sign is when everything starts to unravel. And she had no idea yet, but everything was on the brink of change. The first time it happened, Valentina nearly brushed it off. Almost. The phone buzzed gently against the table, a low vibration that was barely noticeable beneath the music, but she felt it. She glanced down to see an unknown number. Hesitation crept in, and she ultimately declined the call. It didn't seem important. At least, that's what she told herself. But deep down, she didn't know that was her first mistake. She looked back up, her face returning to calm. Dominic hadn't moved or reacted, but there was something about him that felt tighter, a different kind of control, the kind that conceals something. What is it? He asked. Nothing, she replied, and she truly meant it. At that moment, it was nothing. But then, the phone buzzed again. Same number. This time, it was longer, more insistent. Valentina frowned slightly. But wait! Something felt off. She picked it up and stared at the screen. Then slowly she answered. Hello. Silence. Hello. Still nothing. Then a breath. Soft, almost as if someone was there, but didn't want to speak. Who is this? She asked, her voice sharper now. Click. The call ended. Valentina stared at the phone, confused and uncomfortable. What happened? Dominic asked. She shook her head. Wrong number. But even as she said it, she knew that wasn't true, because wrong numbers don't breathe like that, and they don't call back twice. She set the phone down again, but this time she didn't feel at ease. Something had shifted, again, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. Across the room, Aria had frozen, her hand gripping the edge of the table, her eyes locked on Valentina. Then quickly, she looked away. Too quickly. That was the second thing. Valentina noticed it, and this time she didn't doubt herself. That wasn't just coincidence. Something was happening, and somehow it involved her. The music continued, soft and elegant, but it didn't feel calming anymore. It felt far away, like background noise to something that was building up. Then the phone buzzed again. This time, Valentina didn't hesitate. She picked it up right away. Who is this? There was a pause. Then a whisper. Ask him. Her heart skipped a beat. What? Ask him who she is. Click. The call ended again. And just like that, everything shifted. Valentina tightened her grip on the phone, her breathing slowing, becoming more controlled. But inside, Something was breaking, slowly, dangerously. What do they say? Dominic asked. This time, she didn't respond right away. She looked at him, really looked, studied his face, his eyes, searching for something, anything. But he was calm, too calm. They said, nothing important, she said. But that wasn't the truth. And for the first time that night, Valentina lied, because she wasn't ready. Not yet, but the question had already taken root in her mind. Who is she? Her gaze drifted across the room. And there, Arya, standing still, not moving, not serving, just there like she was waiting for something or someone. Suddenly, the air felt heavier, tighter, like something was closing in. Valentina leaned back slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic, he looked up. Yes. She paused just for a moment. Then, are you sure you've never seen her before? A brief silence followed, short but deafening. And then, yes. Simple, direct, but there was something about it that just didn't sit right. It all came too quickly, too smoothly, too perfectly. Valentina picked up on that. She always did, but she held back, not yet ready to confront it. Something inside her whispered to wait, to watch, to listen, and that's exactly what she did. Little did she know, though, that time was slipping away. While she was trying to piece things together, something else was already in motion, moving faster, getting closer, and far more dangerous. The phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a call. It was a message from an unknown number. Valentina opened it slowly, her heart steady, her face calm, but her fingers betrayed her, slightly tense. The message read, he lied. Almost immediately, another message followed. Look at her. Valentina didn't turn her head or react, but her eyes, they shifted just a fraction, and there was Arya already looking back at her. This time, she didn't look away, not right away. Their eyes locked, and in that instant, there was no confusion, no doubt, no uncertainty. What Valentina saw in Arya's eyes wasn't curiosity, wasn't fear, and certainly wasn't an accident. It was something much deeper, something personal, recognition. And that was the moment everything began to unravel. Valentina sat in silence. She didn't utter a word. She didn't budge an inch. All she did was sit there, observing, trying to wrap her head around what she had just witnessed. Because that look, it wasn't just a random glance. It wasn't meaningless. It carried weight. But what did it mean? Her thoughts raced, quietly, carefully, piecing things together. But nothing seemed to fit. Not yet. Then Arya moved, slowly, purposefully, not heading to another table, not making her way to the kitchen, but coming toward them. And that single action altered everything. Valentina felt it right away. That shift, that tightening sensation in her chest. Because this wasn't ordinary. This wasn't just another day. This was something different, something deliberate. Excuse me, Arya said softly as she drew closer. Her voice was steady, too steady. Is everything all right? Valentina didn't respond. Not right away. She was too busy observing, listening, trying to uncover something lurking just beneath the surface. But it was Dominic who spoke up instead. Yes. Short, measured, final, as if he wanted to wrap up the moment. But it lingered, because Arya didn't walk away. Not just yet. She lingered, for a heartbeat longer than necessary. And in that heartbeat, time seemed to slow. Valentina felt it, that peculiar silence, that invisible tension stretching between them. Then, Arya's gaze shifted from Valentina to Dominic, and something shifted, something subtle, but potent. Valentina noticed it, and this time, she didn't doubt it. That wasn't just a stranger's glance. That wasn't mere curiosity. That was history. And suddenly, the message clicked. He lied. Valentina's voice came out calm. Too calm. Do you know him? The question lingered in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. Arya froze. Just for a split second. But that was enough. Because hesitation reveals a truth that words often try to conceal. I know, Arya replied. But her voice, it was no longer steady. And that was all Valentina needed, because she understood, not everything, but enough to realize this wasn't random. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was something from the past, something buried deep, something that had just resurfaced in their lives. Then Arya did something surprising. She stepped a little closer, just enough for only them to hear. And then she said, "You should ask him about the night he disappeared." Valentina's breath caught, just a little, "What?" But Arya didn't repeat herself. She straightened up, stepped back. Her expression was neutral again, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just dropped a bomb that could shatter everything. And then she turned and walked away, just like that, leaving silence in her wake. Heavy, loud, unavoidable. Valentina didn't move, her gaze still fixed on where Arya had stood, her mind racing now, fast, uncontrolled, because that sentence, it didn't clarify anything. It only opened up more questions. What night? Why did he disappear? And why had he never told her? Slowly, she turned back to Dominic, and for the first time that night, she didn't see control. She didn't see calm. She saw something else. Tension. Real tension. Dominic, her voice was softer now, but heavier. What is she talking about? He didn't respond right away, and that was answer enough, because silence is the loudest confession. Valentina's heart sank, not completely, not yet, but enough to sting, because in that moment, she realized something she hadn't before. She didn't know everything about him, and that truth was worse than anything else. The music kept playing. The lights stayed the same. The world didn't hit pause. But for Valentina, everything felt off, slower, heavier, as if the very air had thickened around her. She didn't say a word, not right away, because her mind was racing, fast, carefully, trying to keep it together. But inside, that grip was loosening, and she despised that sensation. Across from her, Dominic reached for his drink, calm, too calm, as if nothing had happened, as if no one had just probed into his past, as if no one had just revealed a crack in his flawless facade. And that was the issue. Dominic, Valentina said softly. He looked up. Yes. Her gaze didn't waver, didn't soften. Don't lie to me. A pause, brief, but heavy. I'm not, he replied, too quickly, once more. And there it was, that same pattern, that same rehearsed response, that same nagging feeling that something was being concealed. Valentina leaned in a bit. Her voice remained steady, but sharper now. Then tell me about the night you vanished. Silence. Not the gentle kind. Not the cozy kind. This was different. This was deafening. Dominic stayed silent. He didn't budge. He just stared at her. And for the first time that evening, he didn't have a grip on the moment. But wait, here's where everything shifted. Because before he could utter a word, before he could react, before he could make it right, Arya moved again. This time, not slowly, not cautiously, but directly, purposefully. And everyone took notice, because she walked straight to their table, not with a tray, not with a purpose, just walking. The atmosphere changed. People began to pay attention. Whispers started, soft, inquisitive, because this wasn't typical. This wasn't service. This was something else, something personal. Valentina sensed it instantly, that sudden weight, that invisible spotlight now trained on them. Arya, Dominic said quietly, a warning, but she didn't stop. She didn't falter. She didn't even glance at Valentina. Her gaze was fixed on him, and that alone spoke volumes. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then she did it. She leaned in and kissed him, not softly, not by accident, not a mistake. It was deliberate, clear, unmistakable. And in that instant, everything shattered. Gasps filled the air. Glasses froze mid-sip. The music kept playing, but no one was really hearing it anymore. Valentina didn't move. She didn't react. She just sat there, watching, because her mind had gone completely blank. Shock, pure, cold, shock. And then It hit her like a wave crashing all at once. Her chest tightened, her fingers clenched, her breath caught, because this wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't merely disrespect. This was something deeper, something worse. Because that kiss wasn't new. It wasn't random. It was all too familiar. And that realization hurt more than anything else. Arya pulled back slowly, her eyes still locked on Dominic. And for a brief moment, something passed between them. Unspoken, but real. Then Dominic stood up, slowly, carefully, and the room fell silent. Completely silent. Because everyone knew this wasn't just a scene. This was danger. Real danger. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. But beneath it, there was something darker, something dangerous. Arya didn't step back, didn't apologize, didn't explain. Instead, she said, "You remember me now, don't you?" Valentina's heart sank, because that sentence confirmed everything, and at the same time shattered everything. Dominic didn't respond, but his silence spoke volumes. And that was the moment Valentina understood. Not fully, not completely, but enough to feel it. That sharp pain in her chest, that crack in her trust, that moment when she realized she had been caught up in a story without knowing how it all began. And now she was facing the consequences. What happened next, no one was ready for. Valentina rose slowly from her chair, the movement almost silent. Yet somehow, everyone in the room heard it. The atmosphere was thick with stillness, all eyes on her, waiting. She could feel it. The weight of the moment, the pressure that signaled a shift, a point of no return. Her gaze flicked from Arya to Dominic, and this time, she wasn't searching for answers. No, she was seeking truth, real truth. Not just words, not control, not silence, just truth. "Who is she?" she asked, her voice soft but carrying a weight that demanded attention, finality. Dominic let out a slow breath, and for the first time, he didn't rush to answer. This time, there were no easy responses, no tidy lies, no way to escape. Everything had already been laid bare, and that was his misstep. That was the moment his grip slipped. That call she ignored, the warning she'd almost brushed aside. This was the outcome. Arya stepped forward again, her tone gentler now, but laden with gravity. "I'll tell you." Dominic's had snapped in her direction. Arya, but she pressed on undeterred. 3 years ago, she began, he disappeared. Valentina's breath hitched, her heart steadying as she focused intently. "He didn't tell anyone where he was going," Arya continued. "No calls, no messages, nothing." Her gaze shifted to Dominic. "And I waited." Silence enveloped them, deep and heavy. "I thought something had happened to him," she added, her voice trembling slightly. "But the truth—" She paused for just a heartbeat. Then he chose to leave. Valentina's chest constricted as clarity washed over her. Not complete clarity, but enough to outline the truth. "You were together," she said softly. Arya nodded. "Yes." In that instant, everything crumbled. Valentina shut her eyes for a brief moment, overwhelmed. Because that truth wasn't just painful. It was humiliating. She hadn't known, hadn't seen it, hadn't questioned it. And now, she stood in the aftermath, grappling with the reality of it all. But Valentina raised her hand, and he stopped right away. Because even now, he knew when she made that gesture, there was no room for debate. "No," she said softly. "Don't." And in that moment, everything shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, but powerful. Because Valentina wasn't reacting. She wasn't falling apart. She wasn't yelling. She was making a choice. Choosing to see clearly. Choosing to understand. Choosing to accept. And that was stronger than anything else. Her gaze moved to Arya. "You came here for this?" she asked. Arya didn't respond right away. Then, "Yes." Honest, direct, and painful. Valentina nodded slowly, because now everything clicked into place. The looks, the tension, the message, the call, the warning. It had all been there, and she had felt it but she hadn't acted. And now, she was here, standing in the truth. "And you," she said, turning to Dominic, "were you ever going to tell me?" Silence. Again. And this time, that silence spoke volumes. Valentina let out a slow breath. And in that moment, something inside her shattered. Not loudly, not visibly, but deeply. Because it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about trust, about truth, about the life she thought she understood, and the reality she had just uncovered. And in that moment, everything changed forever. No one moved. The music had come to a halt. Or maybe it was still playing, but no one could hear it anymore, because the moment had taken over everything. Valentina stood there, still, composed, but inside, something had already ended, not with a bang, not with a crash, just quietly, like a door closing, and never opening again. She looked at Dominic, not with anger, not with tears, but with clarity, and that was what made it different. Because anger fades, but clarity lingers. "I understand now," she said softly, her voice steady, too steady. Dominic took a step forward. "Valentina," but she shook her head. No, just that one word. But it stopped everything, because this wasn't a conversation anymore. This was a decision, and she had already made it. "You didn't lie once," she continued. "You lied every day." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Because it was true. Not just about the past. But the hiding. The silence. The choice not to tell her. That was the real betrayal. Dominic exhaled slowly. "This isn't what you think." But she didn't let him finish. "It's exactly what I think." Her eyes didn't leave his. Not even for a second. Because now, she wasn't searching for truth anymore. She had already found it. And it had changed everything. Across from her, Arya stood quietly, no longer tense, no longer shaking, just still, like she had done what she came to do. And now, she was waiting, but not for him, for herself. Valentina turned slightly, her eyes meeting Arya's, and for a moment, there was no anger there, no jealousy, just understanding, because, in a strange way, they were both standing in the same place. Both hurt, both pulled into something they didn't fully control, both carrying a version of the same man, but not the same truth. "You loved him, Val." A moment of silence hung in the air. Then, "He didn't just leave," Arya said softly. "He vanished." Valentina briefly closed her eyes, because now she could see it all, the complete picture, not just betrayal, but a pattern, not merely a mistake, but a choice. One that had been made repeatedly, and that was what truly mattered. When she opened her eyes again, something had shifted. The pain was still there, but it felt quieter now, more controlled, processed, and in its place was something stronger, a decision. She reached slowly for her ring. The diamond sparkled in the light, beautiful, perfect, just like everything had seemed before. Then she slid it off, slowly, carefully, and set it on the table. The sound was soft, barely audible, but it resonated louder than anything else that night. Dominic froze. Valentina, but she stepped back, not in a dramatic way, not emotionally, just deliberately. "I won't compete with a past you never closed," she said. Simple, clear, final. And in that moment, the power shifted completely, because she didn't fight, she didn't plead, she didn't crumble. She chose herself. And that was something Dominic hadn't anticipated. Not from her. Not like this. The room was still watching, silent, but Valentina didn't care anymore, because this wasn't about them. This wasn't about the scene. This was about her truth, her decision, her life. She turned and began to walk away, each step calm, steady, certain, no hesitation, no glancing back, because when you truly understand something, you don't need to look back. Behind her, no one spoke, not Dominic, not Arya, no one, because some moments don't need words. They speak for themselves. She reached the edge of the room. The soft night air brushed against her skin. And into the unknown we go. But let's be real. Sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes the most painful moments are the ones that reveal the truth. Not the truth you wish for, but the truth you truly needed. Because love without honesty, it's just an illusion. And staying in a place where you're not respected, that's the real loss. That night, Valentina didn't lose everything. She lost what was never real and discovered something far more powerful, herself. But the lesson lingered. Sometimes the single moment can change everything. So, tell me, what would you have done?